I was going to say, I think that for the group they're online today, I think this is where it's really important that yeah, your village managers, your sales team, your assets team are all coming together when making these decisions about refurbishments and are involved throughout the process because yeah, your sales team and your village managers are the ones that are hearing back and getting those real life experience from our residents. And yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly fortunate. I've got such an amazing group of village managers across the country who they just blow me away every day. And their feedback back into those sales meetings, those refurb meetings is so vitally important to ensure that we're constantly improving our product and we're working with our builders to ensure that we're delivering a product that is suitable for what residents are looking for.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. And with regards to Jolin, you dropped that wonderful word code, the building code, and how that sort of comes into play. And quite often there's a bit of a tension with people saying, "Oh, you've got to lift the built form up to today's code, with adds cost." How much of that can you push back on? Can you navigate some of it, or do you just have to accept that, Joe Blogg's builder says, sorry, James, you've actually got to bring this up to code, so your refurb cost has, gone up by $50,000, $60,000 to do that. How much give is there in those conversations generally?
There's quite a bit of give because these places were built at a certain stage, call it the mid 80s. They're 40 years old. Good building surveyors will actually give a dispensation or a secondary consent to say that you don't have to build to today's standard. This is an acceptable finish. Some things you can't, like electrical things you can't. Like you need a smoke alarm. If there wasn't a smoke alarm, it's got to be hardwired in with a battery backup. So those things you can't get out of, and they've got to be in the right spot. So sometimes they're in the wrong spots. You've got to relocate them. But a lot of the other ones, like a shower alcove, a lot of them are too small by today's standards to have just a fixed panel, and you get some water coming out. But you get a secondary consent to say at the time that this was built, this is an acceptable standard. And that's the beauty of having a builder that knows this space well. We often get operators come in and say, "Oh, the other builder says you need to get a building permit. Why aren't you getting one?" And it's like, well, if you don't need a building permit, you don't need one. You can get one still. It just adds cost. So it's having a builder that's partners with you and knows the regs can certainly save the operator a fair bit of cost and also time.
I want to talk now, just come back and finish on the important role. And you've both used it a few times, that word partnership, when it comes to these sorts of things. Quite often, refurbishment, reinstatement, certainly when I first got into the sector, it was very transactional. It was kind of a one and done thing and move on. And one of the things that's really come out in the last sort of 10 years has been that focus on finding the right partner or partners if you're running a panel in order to deliver successful outcomes for residents. So, Mark, for the folk on the call that might not have that relationship in place or have that panel in place, how did you start? How did you start with getting the right partners at Calvary, to make sure you're dealing with more of the jollies of the world as opposed to the James Wiltshire with a hammer turning up saying, "Yeah, mate, I can do this. Here's my price," sort of thing?
Well, the truthful answer is it was a bit of luck, actually, James. I was at an industry event and there was a conversation taking place around refurbishments and yeah, at that time, yeah, I think I'd been in the business about 12 months and I'd sort of just let our asset team, yeah, run its course with it. But we were really boosting up our sales efforts and, yeah, we had some really strong KPIs around what we're doing. And, you know, having a conversation with the builder who said, yeah, our standing is 8 to 9 weeks. And then all of a sudden, starting to talk to other builders where that was the same. And, yeah, really trying to understand, I guess where their values come from as well. So, yeah, I was probably very fortunate in that. But again, I would recommend to anybody on the call to the more that you can get out to your different industry events where you've got those sponsors and those people who are sponsoring the industry and giving back to the industry and know the industry, I think is a really great place to start because they understand the model, they understand the environment, they understand the importance of turning those units over as quick as possible in a manner that is respectful to your residents on the ground. So, as you said, I've been fortunate enough to be in this industry for close on 2 decades. Obviously got a lot of contacts through that, but for those of you, for those on the call who are new, I would be looking at who are those different organisations like Jolly who are sponsoring those events and giving back to the industry, so that you can actually start forming those relationships, because it is so important. And I will always pay a premium to know that if something needs to happen, and generally I'll be leaving that to my asset team or my village manager to be conversing with the project manager. But if things need to get escalated and one of my team comes and says, hey, we got some urgency here, I know that I can pick the phone up to the COO or the CEO of that particular group, and I know they're going to take my call. And if they're not taking my call, I'm getting a call back inside 60 minutes to go, Mark, how can we help?
Yeah, that's great. I've got a few minutes left. Jolly, what are some of the common pitfalls that you see operators making when they're coming to you, or some of the common pitfalls that you just see more broadly when it comes to delivering product on the ground? These are the pitfalls that can delay delivery times. It cause costs to go out. There are common things that you often find your clients are making that we could educate the room on.
I think some of the common things we see, and I'm sure there's some salespeople in this call, but picking things that they like rather than what is probably more readily available long term. You want to have put products in where you've got longevity of replacing parts and sourcing parts. So we've seen some tiles they're pretty brave putting those in sometimes, and it makes it hard to sell a unit. So I think, but taking it on board to say, well, what's the best result and what's going to sell the unit is a good thing. Most of the smaller independent ones don't have a specification, or if they give us a specification that was done 5 years ago, and they've got no idea what the builder's putting in, which is really it's unfair on both parties, because the builder's taking a risk that he's not going to get paid because he's put something different in, but also the salespeople have got no idea what's going in, and showed them one unit, and the resident said, well, why don't I get a different tile or a different toilet? So I think having a clear specification is really good, and also knowing what you're competing against nearby and in the newer places. There's no reason why a lot of these older units can't be improved and have a better resale price. There might be a limit to what you can get, but I think a lot of people that have been selling for a number of years just say, well, I've always had vertical blinds. I've always had laminate bench tops. That's just what we do. So I think being open to looking at different things as well. I suppose the A&As and the external works is probably the one that's probably the hidden cost that the builders don't, or the scopes sometimes miss. Like an internal refurb is pretty standard. We know an 85 square meter unit is going to cost you somewhere around $85,000 to $95,000, depending on what the level of the fit out is, whether it's fully tiled or it's merely appliances or it's Westinghouse appliances. The price doesn't vary too much, but it's the A&As. Has a pergola been put on? Is the paving all fallen away at the back? Someone put a couple of palm trees in that have just ripped up the paving. You'll rip them out. They're the things that I suppose sway the costs more than a standard refurb.
And before we call time in a couple of minutes, I've got Tash tapping me on the shoulder, reminding me to stay on time, James. Costs. We'll finish on that. Then I've got a question for Mark to finish on that. You mentioned that you're seeing more fuel levies and the like, which isn't pushing costs up, which tells you it's a temporary, increase in pricing at the moment. But the other day you were sharing that you can see it having other impacts through delivery times and that. So how do you see your world being impacted over the next 3 to 6 months until things settle down in other parts of the world? And what should we be acutely aware of in our space around cost escalation, delivery timeframes and the like? How could your KPIs start to be challenged with wider market forces and wider global conditions?
Yeah, look, time is definitely going to be a factor, I think, going forward. I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet. Like I know in a lot of the more rural areas, we're not getting deliveries every day like we used to. So Reece might be saying, well, I'm only delivering to this area on a Thursday now. So the time might get delayed. That won't add cost, but there's certainly time. The fuel levies, we're seeing around 1.5 to 2% increase in costs so far. So we've got with a lot of our clients a contingency sum there to say, look, trust us, let us come to you and say what is the difference, because the real cost is X. There might be 1 or 2% that's going to come in sometime over the next 12 weeks we're not aware of. Most of us for a fuel levy. I mean, for those at the Leader Summit, I know I said this on Tuesday, but I shocked everyone when Reece said PVC is going up by 36% next week. So it didn't actually quite go up that far because Reece are wearing half the cost for 6 months. It was going to not come in for 2 months, but the overall cost to our plumbing trades has probably gone up about 5% at worst, even though some things have gone up considerably. Wages certainly haven't gone up. And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on wages to stay there. As things soften, people are going to be more worried about a secure job. So I don't think we're going to get huge cost rises in the next 6 months. Could be surprised, but I don't think so. If it goes up 5%, 8%, that would be the worst case, I would think. And hopefully it's not that bad.
Well, we hope it's not that bad as well. So Mark, final word from yourself as we sort of come to a close of this masterclass. Again, gentlemen, both thank you for your time this morning. If you've probably got a couple of your team that have been on this, you've done the 2 of them with us now. What are some of the key takeaways you'd expect others to be going back to their business and just asking questions about when it comes to what they're doing around best practice with refurb and reinstatement, so they can get better outcomes, obviously, for the business, but more importantly for the future resident that's going to choose that reinstate or refurb unit as the next home?
Yeah, look, I think firstly, the lower cost doesn't mean it's better. As I said before, James, I'd always pay a bit of a premium to have that relationship with the builder, and even to the point of having conversations around if we said, oh, this certain dishwasher, and they say, well, we've actually just had some experience with that particular provider. They're actually they're phasing those out, and parts are really difficult to get by. So we would recommend this. So I think, definitely that relationship piece. I think, and that leads to, not only shorter timeframes just in the original construction period, but also reducing the number of defects. And I think I mentioned on the call the other day, we had a builder come in and we still had plates missing out of the light switches, wires hanging down, a basin missing out of a bathroom, and we got told, well, you just picked that up in defects. And I look at that and go, that's just job not completed. So I think that builder relationship is really important, because it also then flows through to that that overall resident experience for our existing residents living there. I think that getting all of your stakeholders internally involved as well, so that your asset team who might, or your procurement team, or whoever it is that might be working with some of these contractors, to understand why it is that we would be happy to pay $2,000 more on a refurb if it's going to deliver that project 10 weeks earlier, and the importance of everything that flows on from there. And I think finally is just making sure that it's not a cookie cutter approach. Every unit's different, every village is different, and there are so many different things you need to be considering in terms of not just what the aesthetics are, but also what some of those structural things are, and how is this where do we see, how long do we feel as though we're going to get out of this refurbishment, and what other perceived problems could there be in the future? So, if the air conditioning system is 7 years old and we think there's another 3 years in it, is it actually better to replace it there and then when you're doing the full refurbishment, rather than it possibly breaking down in the first 6 months that a resident lives there, and that whole moving experience is diminished? Because I'm sure that everybody would know on the call that if you don't get that moving experience right, that it doesn't matter. You can have a resident who lives there for another 7 years, and in 7 years' time, at a annual management meeting, they'll raise the fact that when they moved in, the air conditioning blew up, and it was it ruined their experience. So I think that that partnership, making sure that all stakeholders in the business are across it, and making sure that you are fluid in your approach, and ensuring that really good that high quality customer experience, looking ahead into the future.